Live from Paris. It's time now for our Media Watch. We're joined by James Creedon for this. This is one of the stories that we've been covering in part for the past couple of days. It makes quite a lot of headlines here in France. It's the spanking of children. Yes. Why is it making headlines?
Well, the Council of Europe has rapped France over the knuckles for not outright banning spanking in France, although isn't rapping on the knuckles corporal punishment.
I believe it is.
Just realise that. Anyway, Council of Europe shouldn't be engaging in that kind of behaviour, but we'll come back to that. In any case, there is an exception in French law for the education of children. You can spank them if they need to be educated about something. That is the law. And the position in France is that the penal code already sufficiently has legislated for the abuse of children, and children are sufficiently protected. In any case, should another law be introduced to fully and outright ban spanking? That is the question, and everybody has an opinion, Luke. To ban spanking is to give power to children, says one internet user speaking to 20 Minutes. Meanwhile, the former education minister for the political right, Luc Chatal, says that he is not in favour, personally, of corporal punishment, but he thinks it should be maintained as a sort of a dissuasive measure, and he compared spanking, Luke, to nuclear dissuasion. So it's the sort of nuclear option that should be on the table but never, ever used, right? So that's one.
It's quite harsh language for spanking.
It is indeed. Elsewhere, cartoons such as this showing for and against, because of course it has divided everybody, but this cartoon suggesting that those in favour of it are parents and those against it are children, and indeed this is all about protecting children, so those against it, there you go. Now, Eric Zemmour is being caricatured here. He's a controversial right-wing commentator. Today we can no longer smack children. Tomorrow it'll be women, he says. Now that's perhaps a little bit unfair on Eric Zemmour, who I don't think is in favour of physically assaulting women. But I suppose what the point that is trying to make is that the progressive view is not this one. It is not. If you're to be progressive, you have to move in. You wouldn't hit women or colleagues, so you shouldn't hit children either. And indeed, the debate that I heard earlier in the newsroom was that if you go back a generation or two ago in France, children would have had their trousers pulled down and were publicly spanked in classrooms, humiliated in front of their classmates, and it's something that is unthinkable today. And so perhaps what we think of as acceptable today will be unthinkable in 10 years' time. So spanking we need to be pulled forward in that sense, or made to evolve. A lot of criticism for European policymakers. I think there's a degree of confusion on this one, Luke, because the Council of Europe, of course, is not the European Union. It's another body based in Strasbourg. But some people saying, hold on a minute, the Troika took 3 million Greeks out of the health system, and some died as a result of that. Isn't this much more serious than spanking or giving people a slap? Others mentioning 50 Shades of Grey. So you can see people going off in all sorts of crazy directions and irrelevant comments. This one in English: spanking a child is most often done by adults who were abused as a child, and always by an adult who is emotionally out of control, says Jack Rogers. And a lot of discussion then, I suppose, of Sweden, which was the first country to fully and outright ban spanking in 1979. The idea of spanking your kids is taboo. So that's to come back to what I was saying earlier. Maybe in a generation's time, if this is legislated for, we will view it as taboo and as always having should be the case, if that makes sense.
You say it's a taboo in Sweden. What's been the opinion outside of France, around the rest of Europe?
That's right, because 22 countries have gone ahead and fully and outright banned corporal punishment of the 47 member states of the Council of Europe, not the European Union, of course. And so several other countries are also having this debate. For example, just a quick look at the Irish press, where in the last month or so this was making headlines. The Pope made a remark last month, actually in defence of smacking. He said it's okay. Essentially, he said that Pope Francis thinks that smacking children is beautiful, in fact, when it's done right. Now, that made a former Irish President, Mary McAleese, publicly react. She wrote a letter to the Irish Times criticising the Pope over these remarks. What faith are we to have now in the Holy See's commitment to the Convention of the Rights of the Child, she said. So it's a debate that indeed is happening outside of France as well. One article that I found about criticising, in fact, Sweden, which is being held up as the model in this regard. Some analysts are saying, is Sweden raising a generation of brats, Luke?
It's a good question.
I don't know, but some people think that Swedish children could do with a little bit more discipline.
I see. Finally, just one last story. This is French media. The Muslim veil, should it be banned at university? We've heard some things along this on this story. Yeah. Quite a lot over the past decade or so.
That's right. Now, of course, there was the famous outright ban of the Muslim veil in French schools that went back to Jacques Chirac's presidency, and that is still banned in schools. It's not without its criticism, even within France and overseas. But now, should it be banned in universities? Now, Pascal Boitard, who is the Minister for the Rights of Women, has suggested it should be. On the political right, Eric Ciotti, who also made he made a proposal in this direction as well, agrees with the socialist minister in this regard, saying that that French secularism or laïcité should be defended by all Republicans. Others, quoting here on Twitter, François Fillon, the former prime minister, saying we should be very careful before we regulate what adults wear. And of course, the whole domain of freedom is being discussed here in this regard. Some saying this is just ahead of elections. Just one or two things more. The presidents of French universities are pretty much all against this rule. And others are saying that this is on the Mediapart website, that this is taking secularism to a dangerous degree and it's infringing on freedoms. So it's another touchy debate.
It's a debate that has, as I said, been very important over the past decade here in France. And clearly that is not the end of the issue either. James Creedon, thank you very much for that Media Watch.